Hello from Hollywood. Actually, North Hollywood.
Want to give him 10?
I can sit next to Joe.
Hey Lou, how are you?
In the past, there's been complaints about this is okay to make. Maybe before I got one.
And that one's piccata chicken.
Yeah, that's funny. Thank you.
Lasagna? Certainly. Thanks.
Joe, would you honor us with a word? Please. We didn't organize this. I'm glad he's okay with it.
I hate to do this. Sheehan is better at it than I am. Thank you. It's a pleasure to see so many people I worked with. I came to LA in 1963 from Kansas City. And my first assignment, before I ever got on the air, because they didn't know what to do with me until they changed over to the Newsman's News, or the News as we called it, or Sam Zellman called it, was to go out with Bill Stout the night that the Supreme Court, I think, upheld the idea, or said the IRS was right to get rid of the tax deduction for the $2 martini, the lunch. And so Stout said, let's go to Lowry's Prime Rib, and I'll do some interviews, and we had the Telemobile. And so in those days, we did big stories. And we couldn't get a signal, so we went to the Tail of the Pup. And Bill couldn't get an interview because the only two people there at the counter was Bill and myself. So he said, this gentleman just arrived in town from Kansas City. Sir, what do you think? And I said, well, I told him what I thought of it. I made it very quick. And it's the first time I'd ever been in my time, and I'm sure all of you can appreciate it, where you could do a live remote from someplace because of the Telemobile and helicopter and that crazy guy at KTLA who invented all that stuff. That was my introduction to Los Angeles, and a real happy thrill to work with Bill Stout, who was one of the giants of what we did. And from there, I went to KNXT, and then to CBS, and then quit, and then came back to Eyewitness News, or as I called it, Eyewitness News, which is not my, I didn't coin that. And because I wouldn't wear the 7, just the same way as the Pat Boone story, I ended up out because I said, I'm not going to wear the 7. I think it's degrading and all that. And Don Curran, who was the new general manager he succeeded J.J. McMahon. All these names go back in history. History to be forgotten, except by us. That's why we're here. We're the vestige of a wonderful era, which will never come again, sadly, for the people who are working in it. But we had a wonderful time, and the joy of walking in the door, I don't go to these things, and I don't like to do what I'm doing right now, but the joy is seeing people who I worked with and apologizing to some people who I insulted, or as Peggy Holter knows, and Nora, all the beautiful women I hit on, if they're here, look at what happened to me. I said to Patty, I'm going to wear a sign under here, guess who I used to be? And in case any of you forgot. But the joy is seeing great faces and remembering times that will never come again for the young people who are working in it, but they're all very smart for the most part. They're just troubled and saddled with bad management. From the desk on up, sadly. But that's my opinion. So thank you for letting me be a geezer here as well as in Camarillo. Thank you.
Joe, thank you very much. It was wonderful. I mean, this has been going for 5 years. I'd always wanted Joe to come. Patty Eckert, thank you very much. We're going to get to some video here in a moment, but I do have a couple of other people who want to talk. So I'm going to let them have a word, ask you all to keep it short, and then I'm going to show you a 13-minute video put together by Doug Kriegel that was on the air a couple of nights ago, and I know you'll love it because it stars many of us, okay? So there's something to be said for that. Reverend Sullivan, where are you?
As we all know, here we have a lot of deaths, and death is easy, but comedy is hard. But, you know, the other thing is that aside from that thing, in a way, death is easy, but marriage is hard. And nobody knows this, and I don't want to set a precedent, but Jack and Carolyn Fox were married, are married now for 60 years. This is their anniversary. And yes. And so rather than have everybody coming in every week and talking about their different anniversaries and everything else, if you have an anniversary that's 60 years or over, we can celebrate it here. But can you imagine being married to a reporter for all those years?
For the last 4 or 5 of these lunches, we've honored people who've passed. And they've turned into lengthy tributes, very worthwhile tributes. Bob Flick was the last one. Jerry Rubin before him. Jess Marlowe, of course, in the past. Stan Chambers. There have been a lot of them. We think about them every day. And I thought, nobody died this time. But that's actually not true. Because we overlook somebody who never came to these lunches, but who we all know. And I'm going to get Professor John Beaupre to come forward and talk to us about KPPC's Steve Julian.
I have a relatively limited career in television, but a long career in doing radio. And one of the people that I was very close to at KPCC when I first arrived there to fill in the shoes of Larry Mantle and Pat Morrison and Kitty Feldy, was pretty intimidating after years of doing stuff for NPR and BBC. But there was this deep-voiced, very friendly, smart as a whip guy who was the morning host for Morning Edition on NPR and the regular programming there. And while I didn't remain close to Steve over the years, I could hear him virtually every morning. And that wonderful resonant voice was reassuring and knowledgeable and friendly, challenging in the things that he asked of people. His close relationship with Larry Mantle. Every year they went to Arizona for spring training. Just was very, very impressive. And I felt very warm and welcomed into this kind of tight-knit, high-paced community. Steve, as you may or may not know, contracted a brain cancer last fall, and it was really not really operable. And the last couple of months have been tough for he and his wife. Larry was at his side when he passed last weekend, and I just to say that we've lost a real giant in non-commercial radio. KPCC, as a result, has named their main announce studio, their morning host and their afternoon host announce studio, the Steve Julian Studios. So for those of you who are lucky enough to know Steve or to ever meet him, cheers to Steve, and there'll be few like him coming around again. Think kindly of him and give him warm thoughts in your passing. Thanks.
The story on this video you're about to see, and some of you have seen it because it was on the air 2 nights ago on KOCE Channel 50, PBS of Southern California. And it was put together by Doug Kriegel, who, as you know, does a program called The Drive-By Economist, which airs on an occasional basis. It's a half-hour anthology series. Looks at people and communities, big and small, in Southern California, and he does a very nice job. Back in October of 2014, Doug asked me, can I come along to the event that we had at Universal Studios to honor both George Nicholaw and Jess Marlowe? And I said, sure. And he said, can I bring a crew? So he brought a 2-person crew, and they shot interviews with a whole bunch of folks. So since then, I've been asking him, whatever happened to the interviews? You want to give me the tape, or shall we do something with it? And he said, no, I promise you I'll come up with something. And he did. And he sent it to me about a month ago and said, this is going to be on the air on April 28th on KOCE. What do you think? So I screened it, and it was wonderful. He really told a great story about television news in Los Angeles, past and present, using us, the people that he interviewed at that luncheon. I think he's done it very, very cleverly.
Okay, let's talk about the television news business in Los Angeles. The economics of TV news is changing now that so many people are getting their news from social media and the internet. But the basic mission of local TV news has not changed. Here's a look back at some of the people and issues involved in the last 50 years in LA.
The first continental atomic detonation in the history of the world.
Kennedy has been shot, along with one or two others. They're on the ground.
There are numerous small fissures in the ground around the Van Orman Lakes.
Television news broadcasts in Los Angeles have been on the leading edge of trends in TV news across America.
Don't go near this area. South Central Los Angeles at Florence and Normandy.
Still, LA's local television news has its own unique and original Southern California flavor, and it impacts the public.
Earthquake. Yep, we're having an earthquake.
Fox Alert on the westbound 10.
One of the most controversial issues in LA involves police pursuits broadcast live.
We have some breaking news we're going to follow right now. Are we going to go right to it?
In many cases, the chase takes over an entire newscast. Everything else planned for the news that day gets scrubbed. Actually, police pursuits in Los Angeles tend to injure bystanders at more than twice the rate of pursuits in the rest of California, according to an LA Times analysis.
We're going north on the 405. We're coming to Sunset Boulevard right now.
The most famous pursuit in television history was the so-called low-speed chase in 1994, when murder suspect O.J. Simpson was being pursued by a phalanx of police cars for 60 miles. Simpson, with a gun to his head, was in the back seat of this white Ford Bronco, driven by his friend Al Cowling.
O.J. Simpson formally charged today with 2 counts of murder.
Thousands of people across L.A. were watching the chase. Then CNN picked up the pursuit live, and suddenly millions of viewers across America were following it.
I saw several occasions people with signs saying, "Go, OJ, go," and I thought to myself as we're driving, how did they have time to make the sign and figure out we would be driving right past their home?
KNBC reporter Conan Nolan was on the freeway just ahead of the Simpson pursuit.
We realized they said, well, OJ has a gun to his head, and he's in the back seat. Alec Collins is driving. And I kept thinking, because remember in the note that Robert Kardashian read, he talked about the media. So I thought, okay, great. We're going to pull up next to him. I got a photographer taking his picture, and he'll use that as the moment to pull the trigger. And we'll be blamed for the death of O.J. Simpson. So I didn't want that to happen.
Eventually, Simpson turned himself in to police. Of course, most freeway pursuits are much less newsworthy, but still they tend to attract huge local audiences.
When I was producing the KTLA Morning News, of course we covered the pursuits. And one day the producer and I said, wait a minute, this is like being held hostage. There's no news value here. If a guy's going 60 miles an hour on the freeway in the middle of nowhere, why are we tying up valuable airtime to do it? So we decided when the next pursuit happened, we would tape it, but we wouldn't air it live. And sure enough, the next pursuit, that happened. We passed on it. It was one of those pursuits, so who cares? Our competition at Channel 11 carried it live. The next morning, the ratings came out. They had 4 times the audience that we did. The general manager stuck his head in the control room and said, from now on, we cover all pursuits.
Joel Tater, veteran news show producer, says LA TV stations were among the first in America to start using helicopters to cover news.
The first live telecast from a helicopter.
The pioneer was KTLA, which launched its chopper in 1958.
KTLA owned the breaking news from the helicopter. I was fortunate to be in the booth during the Baldwin Hills dam collapse. I was in the booth for the Watts riots. We owned those stories because we were the only ones who were carrying it live.
Tater was speaking at a tribute honoring the late news anchorman Jess Marlowe, who has passed away. The event, held at Universal Studios, showed videos of Marlowe reporting around the world. Here Jess is doing a time travel story, what LA was like in 1931, along with co-anchor Connie Chung.
The population of Los Angeles is 1.25 million, and many of them are huddled around their radios listening to a new crooner named Bing Crosby sing about the blue of the night meeting the gold of the day.
Men's suits are advertised at $19.95. That's $19.95. Eggs are 28 cents a dozen.
Another of Marlowe's co-anchors was Colleen Williams.
And Jess really took me under wing and taught me everything I know about the business. He was a great mentor.
On video, Tom Brokaw weighed in from New York.
My friend Jess Marlowe and I were both children of the Midwest when we got the call to come to KNBC and have one of the most exciting adventures any broadcast journalist can have.
Brokaw was one of the star anchormen that graced LA television in the early years. That list included Jerry Dunphy, Tom Snyder, Hal Fishman. Of course, Stan Chambers did virtually every job in more than 60 years at KTLA.
Fred has the sports, and we'll all be right back with Nightside. Please join us.
One of the first women to anchor a local news broadcast and earn the big bucks was Kelly Lang.
I was the first woman co-anchor for NBC and all of its own stations in the country. How did I do it? Whoa. My hands are still bloody. It's the glass ceiling. Nobody wanted me. You know, they didn't want a woman. They said, whoever heard of that, you know?
But many women still had to earn their bones as field reporters.
We were competitors, but we had something in common. We were both mature first-time mothers.
Yes, and we both love shoes.
And we love shoes.
Two of the best women reporters, Adrienne Alpert and Laurel Erickson, who won a Peabody Award.
I love stories where you had to uncover wrongdoing. I love grilling politicians who weren't telling the truth.
The Riverside Figueroa Bridge was built in 1926 and...
Alpert was electrocuted when a microwave antenna, like this one on her news van, came too close to power lines, creating an explosive charge, sending a surge of electricity, burning Adrienne. She lost parts of her arm and leg. After that happened, stations across the country began retraining their field people to avoid such accidents.
It is something that happened in my life 14 years ago, and I refuse to let it define me. It's not that I don't talk about it much. I just don't let it be anything more in my life than a mere inconvenience when it has to be. There's more safety training, and I suppose if there's any silver lining in that cloud, I would just say that I hope that this never happens to anybody else.
Primera edición.
Never before have there been so many women and minorities in this business, that is a wonderful thing.
Nowadays, local news on Spanish language KMEX TV has a larger audience than many English language newscasts. The growing Latino population is encouraging stations to be more inclusive in hiring and assigning stories.
I remember when I first started at Channel 2 back in 1977. I'll never forget this. I won't give the guy's name. He would not let me cover a story unless it involved a Hispanic. Had to be a Mexican involved. And one day, there's 4 kids that got hit by a train in the city of Bell. Well, he thought that they were all Mexican kids. Well, they turned out to be all white kids. And I got to do the story, and from then on, I wasn't stuck with just Mexican stories anymore.
Confirmation from Buckingham Palace tonight that the world has lost Princess Diana at age 36.
I got a call from Channel 4 saying that Princess Diana had died.
Jim Giggins was a popular reporter who worked at 3 networks. Giggins just happened to be vacationing in France when Princess Diana was killed in a Paris auto accident.
And so I rushed to Paris the next morning because there were no flights. And when I get there, Prince Charles is coming to take her body. But a good story, though, even before, I'd had dinner with a friend, and he said his daughter was marrying this Brazilian surgeon. But then I'm in Paris, and I hear, over here in French, this woman saying that there was a Brazilian surgeon who tried to save her life. So I call my friend and say, this can't be your new son-in-law. He said, yes. So I get him on the phone, and he tells me his story. He's in there, he's massaging her heart. He is massaging Princess Diana's heart. He said there's almost no blood on her. It's as if she's not been in an accident. The operating room had something like 30 people in there trying to save her, and he is the guy that's doing it. And of course, she passes away. He says the entire operating room is in tears, and they see people die every day. But this was Princess Diana.
Dead at the age of 36 in a terrible car accident.
Thank you to NBC Universal.
That Jess Marlowe tribute also included news managers, people the public rarely sees. The most legendary was Pete Noyes, who managed news at many of the stations.
We have a weird homicide.
He broke major stories like the Manson family murders.
The Manson murder case was the biggest story I ever covered because, as you know, I broke the story at Channel 2. The funny thing is, a month before, we told the LAPD, the captain, Bob Hilder down there, who the murderers were, and he hung up on me. He said I was a crazy son of a bitch and get off the phone and never call back. And then when it was all over, they gave me a commendation from the LAPD, and I used it for toilet paper.
Many of the news veterans at this event have retired, but some are critical of the TV news business today.
Everybody glosses over the stories. We're doing stories that are celebrity-driven, and they're not news-driven. They're not event-driven or history-driven. I think we've left history in a bin someplace.
The problem is that they're cramming the shows with as many stories as they can get in, and oftentimes they're not very well told.
Keep this in mind. The word media is a derivation of mediation. And so there's an argument to be made that there will still be a need for institutions like television news, like newspapers, to mediate all the information that comes that's being flooded into your phone and on your TV and everywhere else.
This tribute luncheon at Universal was arranged by former news producer Bob Tarlow, who heads a media group of about 300 people known as the News Geezers. They meet regularly.
It's preserving old friendships, making new ones, telling war stories, having a lot of laughs, or in the case of the event today, honoring a couple of people who were part of our organization who have fallen by the wayside. Unfortunately, have died, but we want to remember them and keep their memories alive.
That individual was driving a blue 1960s Ford Mustang.
Of course, Hollywood studios are located in LA, and sometimes news people here are asked to act in movies. Kent Shocknick has appeared in over 50 feature films.
I think that they needed someone on the set tomorrow who already knew how to read a teleprompter, and so they said, "Can you come on down?" And I said, "Sure, why not?"
We don't have an
Shocknick was seen on television around the world in 1987 when a major earthquake hit as he was on the air.
I'm going to get under this desk. I apologize for the theatrics.
I'm just a California boy. I went through those quake drills. When an 80-pound light or lights swing above you, you get out of the way. And I always tried to tell myself that my job was to report what was going on, but I really didn't want to risk my life while doing it.
My first job here was Sacramento bureau chief at Channel 4 News. When Ronald Reagan was governor, 3 LA stations had bureaus in the state capitol covering California government and politics, but they were all shut down. When my station closed the Sacramento bureau, my boss called me and he said, "Sorry, we need that money to pay for a helicopter. Got to cover those car chases."
Some of you are probably wondering why Doug's not here, and I thought he was going to be. He called me about 4 times this week to make sure that the projector was going to work and that we could do this. However, yesterday he let me know he's got a virus that did not go away as quickly as he thought, so he's home trying to nurse that. And I asked him, can I still go ahead and show the video? And this is what he wrote me. Sure, feel free to show it. After all, the news piece wouldn't have happened without you putting together that great luncheon for Jess. That occasion was a chance to talk about some of the interesting things that happened in local news over the past 40 to 50 years, with some of the people involved telling their own stories. I think there was news value in talking about why stations cover police pursuits and why they don't cover Sacramento, and women who dealt with a glass ceiling in TV news. Sorry, I'm under the weather. Not as strong as I used to be. I'm looking for a career change, working on it. 40 years in TV news is long enough. I still love being involved. And that was from Doug Kriegel. As you know, another hat that I wear is chairman of the 8 Ball Welfare Foundation, which has been in operation for 58 years now. and it helps people in our profession through rough economic times. The website is 8Ball Foundation, number 8, followed by the word ball and then foundation, 8ballfoundation.com. You can donate. It's PayPal, credit card. You can read all about it. This goes back to the 50s when Marilyn Monroe and Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball and Bob Hope, among others, started the foundation. And it's carried forward, and it's exclusively to help people in the 5 counties. Actually, we sometimes get into Santa Barbara, in the greater Los Angeles area. And I thank you for your help. Some of you in here are regular contributors, and I greatly, greatly appreciate it. We want to be able to help people for the next 50 years. We had a couple of technical credits. I want to thank Vince Mack, who is normally the helicopter camera photographer in Skyfox, KTTV Channel 11, for being here and shooting the video. And I also want to thank Bill Dawson, a very good friend from Pepperdine University. Where's Bill? He's hiding back there. I ducked out for a second. Okay. I want to thank Bill from Pepperdine, who always provides me technical support. This is his projector. So thank you very, very much for that. I just want to thank you all for being here. This group means the world to me, as I know it does to all of you. So I had lunch with Ross Keston the other day, and Ross said something that I've heard from others, but means everything. He said, man, I won't even name who it is, it doesn't matter. He said, you know, I got hooked up with such and such because of the geezers, and now we see each other socially. And several of you have told me the same story. So this goes beyond the lunches 4 times a year. It goes into enduring friendships and fostering those and making new ones. So thank you for being here. God bless you. We've got the room till 3 o'clock, so please continue to visit. Vinny and David will come around and do some interviews, so please do that, and we'll incorporate them into the finished video, and I'll let you know by email when that's up. Thank you. God bless you all.
You remember Joseph Benty? Yes, I do. Start on a 2-shot and then go in. Okay. See, I used to do this. Yeah. Are you rolling? Yes, I am. Oh, good. He's rolling. I got it. Remember that? Yes. Rolling away. So you were like the guest of honor here today. There was some kind of vibration going on.
Pretty lean.
But everybody was saying, Joseph Benty is here. Right. How did that make you feel?
Odd. I was never comfortable doing that stuff, and I've been out of it a long time. So I was very happy not to be here. But when you get here and you see all the people you work with, like you, we shared offices. You were across the hall.
Yeah.
And remembering many things you forgot or thought you forgot, that's very enjoyable. So I'm glad I came. By that I'm not using ego. I prefer to be a bum at home, and I'd never leave Camarillo. That's my answer.
But here at this point in your life, you now know for sure, and this little occasion here today certainly reinforces the idea that you are indeed an icon of the news anchor.
I'm alive.
Yeah.
That's how you become an icon.
Oh, that is.
Live long enough, yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, I worked hard. I believed in it. I still write wonderful columns on Facebook.
Yeah, on Facebook.
In answer to letters and crazy right-wingers, but other than that, I'm totally out of it. I'm now in my 8th year of learning how to play golf. I will never master it. We have a happy life, and I live in a retirement community, and I don't ever leave it, actually, other than to play golf.
But you left a real mark on the news business. Do you have any sense of what that mark is, or how you would define it or describe it?
I always enjoy your countenance because I think you're smiling. I didn't leave a mark. I think I did. I left little pieces.
Okay.
I cared a lot about what I did. I don't think it's the same. There are a lot of very intelligent people doing it now. As I said in my remarks, and not thinking I had to say anything, that it's the management and the ownership that has totally distorted it, and the FCC let it happen, and we lost control. And when we lost control, news became a commodity. And when that happened, that was the end of it.
So what do you think about your husband of 36 years, Joseph Benty, comes to this lunch today, and there's some vibe that cast him in the role of icon and honored guest, really.
Which is really a nice thing. because where we live and how we live. And for most of us, that's gone. And it's been gone for 30 years. So people don't know who you are. Didn't you used to be, is what they usually say about Joseph,
Yeah.
but here it doesn't happen. Yeah, it's great.
But there was a sense that he has left some kind of indelible mark on the idea of anchoring the news, that communicative.
I don't think that's true.
Oh, no?
No, I don't think that. I mean, would you? We don't watch the news much, but there are no Joseph Bentys on the air now. I don't think.
Right. He left a mark that has not been duplicated for sure.
Or even tried.
If anything, it's been
I know.
degraded perhaps
I
in
know.
terms of what's going on these days.
I know.
But what about you? You used to be out there on the street with camera crews and interviewing people and doing reports on education and kind of you had a certain sort of your fingertip on the heartbeat of the city in a lot of ways. Do you miss that now?
No.
No?
No, because I remain a nosy person. So I'm nosy in Camarillo.
A nosy person?
A nosy person, and I'm nosy in Camarillo as I was in Los Angeles. So no, I don't miss it.
Wait a minute, you were more than nosy though, you were very informative.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you miss that part of playing that role?
David, we're 75 years old, for God's sakes. I mean, it's time to slow down, focus, enjoy our families, and that's what we do.
Because you didn't work with Joseph Benty.
Actually, I worked with Joe at Channel 7.
Oh, when he came back to the Eyewitness News idea. Well tell me this, because you certainly know the lay of the land when it comes to any newsroom or any news product that is trying to be created or put together day by day by day over the years. And it's kind of funny, to me, it struck me that here we're having this little news geezers gathering for lunch on a Saturday afternoon, and when Benty walks in, it's like royalty has just entered the door, and he's like all of a sudden the guest of honor, and an icon is among us. What do you think of that kind of idea? How can there be an iconic news anchor man who hasn't been on the air for 30 years?
Well, because I think of the fact that Joe Benty, at least when I worked him, was always, he was kind of kept the focus of the news in the newsroom and wanted always to have the best product on the air. He wouldn't just take stuff that was handed him. And so there was always a great deal of respect for what he did and the product that he wanted to put out. And I think it was also the fact why he was looked upon that when he came here, what a special occasion was that he has not participated in Los Angeles television or any of these kind of events for so long.
Yeah.
Having him come and participate was a special treat, especially for those of us who work with him and haven't seen him in a long, long time. And the fact that he's not living in the area, it did make it a special occasion to have him here. Can I tell one?
Please do.
One Joe Benty story. When I
Yes.
worked with him at Channel 7, he liked to have the stuff written a certain way, and we used to take, and these were the days of the typewriters, we would take and write it.
Typewriters?
Typewriter. And he'd put it into a dish, and Joe Benty would look at it and say, this isn't very good, and he would take and rewrite it and throw it back in the dish then. Well, one of the writers didn't care for this much, took out the copy that Joe had written, rewrote it with his initials on it, put it back in. Joe took the same story, looked at it and said, this is terrible, and he wrote it again. He went through this 3 times before he finally realized he was rewriting his own copy.
What was the dish?
Oh, the dish was just like a tray, like an inbox tray that you'd put your copy in after writing it.
Yeah, what is that about Joseph Benty? Why did he leave such a mark?
He, number one, as an anchor, he had all of the proper things. He had the great voice, and he looked good, and he was solid. He was a solid newsman. And he was just somebody you really respected. And it was back then when it was a lot more important job than it is now. Being a TV anchorman, I don't think is as important. As many people don't see you, that's for sure.
Yeah.
At Channel 7, we'd get a 7 or an 8, when you'd win. And now if you want to win, you get a 1 in the rating. So that means... So it's not such a big deal anymore.
0.7.
0.7,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So it was just, he was there in the days when it was a big deal and it mattered.
It's funny how he left I don't know if you call it a mark. If the mark has been maybe deteriorating in other people's hands, but there was a clarity about his contact with the audience through the camera.
Yeah.
And it's some kind of a magical thing so that you believed, and he was very conscientious about, everything being accurate.
Well, see, that's a rare thing when you have somebody who can connect with the audience and be accurate.
Yeah.
And you look at what just happened with Brian Williams. He's got that great connection with the audience.
Right.
And that's why it kind of fell apart for him for a while there, because you have to have that connection, too.
Did you work with Joseph?
I was in newspapers then, and I think I didn't get to Channel 2 till after he left, so we kind of passed. But
How many years did you spend on the air?
20.
20 years. Now, at this point, tell the truth. Do you miss it at all?
No, not at all.
Not a
at
little
all.
bit?
Not at all. No, because I covered 14 presidential conventions.
Right.
14. It's just, I look at it now, I love to watch it all. Mark Coogan,
Yeah.
he and I, we text all the time back and forth. I'm writing, but I don't want to be out there doing it because the TV has changed. Local TV has changed, and there's no way you can pull this story together the right way with the resources that we currently have.
True, yeah.
Back then, in fact, I covered a lot of presidentials when I was a newspaper reporter, starting with Reagan in 1980. I was on the plane with Reagan before he was president. That's how old I am. But then you could be a real reporter, and you traveled. I traveled the whole year.
Yeah.
Reagan, the whole thing, Bush, and all of that. So then you can really do your job. It just got to be, you can't do your job in TV news anymore.
Yeah.
But I'm sure they have found other ways to do it. Now there's social media, and they're tweeting, and they're still getting information out there, I'm sure. But I would never be able to do that. If they made me tweet or do something like that, I'd say, how can I do that? Then somebody else will get my information, and then I won't be able to break it. How does that work? It wouldn't work. I don't know. But 33 years in news business altogether, and 13 newspaper. That's a lot of work.
But you've got to kind of have been there, done that, and you don't need to do it again, huh?
I love it, and I like to watch it, but I don't want to do it. Coogan and I, we always go back and forth. Aren't you glad we weren't out there? Aren't you glad we're not covering this? Aren't you glad we're not there?
So what do you want to do now instead with your life?
Well, I have a lot of parties.
Parties? Okay.
As you know.
Yeah. So, you've been around the news business quite a while here in Los Angeles, and I noticed at this luncheon when Joseph Benti walked in, it was like royalty entering the door. He was such an icon. Would you compare what he did with the guys that you worked with, like Colleen Williams, and who else did you work with?
I work with Kelly Lang. I work with Jess Marlowe. I work
John
with,
Beard?
John Beard. I also work with Kirstie Wilde.
So if you had to compare them in terms of who's the biggest anchorman icon, how would you compare them?
Well, I guess the biggest icon I would say would probably be somebody like a John Beard or a Colleen Williams.
And Colleen's still doing it.
Colleen's still doing it, and I also work with Paul Moyer as well.
All right. Whatever happened to Paul Moyer?
Paul Moyer left the company maybe 4 years before I did. I left in 2013.
Oh. And now what are you doing?
Right now I own some rental property, and I'm managing some of the rental property, and I'm also teaching at UCLA Extension broadcast news writing.
Oh, are you good? What do you think of the way it is now as opposed to then?
The other day I had an opportunity to go over to Universal to see the Channel 4 studios over there. And because I directed the Channel 4 News for a number of years, back in the 60s and the 70s with Brokaw and Snyder and Marlowe, and great times. And that's my agent.
Yeah, right. Mr. Joseph.
And I ran into the guy who's directing the news now, and he said, come into the control room. And he said, we can do this now with just two people in the control room. There are no camera people on the floor. There's no stage manager. There's no technical director. There's no audio guy. And I said to him, yeah, but are the shows any better now than they were then? And he sort of didn't know how to answer that.
No, but they're cheaper.
They're cheaper, and they really aren't any better. But what's shocking to me is how few people are watching local news now. The ratings are the lowest I've ever seen. And it's really a shame because you miss out on a lot of information. Not that they are covering a lot of information. They probably would if the ratings were higher, but it's really a shame the way it's what's the word? Devolved.
Yeah. Devolution.
Yeah, it's devolved. Local news.
Devo.
Local news is not very good now, and that's a shame.
He's the guy that.
I'm not famous for anything, but I'm a survivor.
What are you proud of?
You know, I was fortunate to work on 3 successful shows. I did Tomorrow Show, Times Time, 2 in the Town, The Seabirds, Connie Chung, and the KTLA Morning News, which is much maligned.
You lost that, didn't you?
No, I came in after 6 years. The executive producer.